right, welcome everyone to our first online talk of this year. My name is Adeline Law and I manage the Gardiner Shop. You will notice your mics and videos are muted and the chat option has been disabled. However, there will be a Q&A following today's conversation, and so we invite you all to send us questions through the Q&A function at any point. Note that this program is being recorded and live streamed with closed captioning. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that Toronto is located on the treaty lands and ancestral territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Petun, and the Mississaugas of the Credit Nation. The community we work in is the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to learn and live on this land. Today, I'm excited to introduce our moderator, Alison Brannen, who is part of the Fusion Fireworks 2023. So I'm going to hand it off to you.
Hi, Adeline. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here. My name is Alison Brannen, and I'm the Vice President of Fusion Clay and Glass. Today, we have 5 artists who are participating in the fireworks exhibition on now at the Gardiner Museum. So each of the artists is going to present their work. The topic today is inspiration. How do we get it? Where does it come from? And how do we sustain it? What happens if it's not there? So I would like to start the presentation today with Hannah Johnson. So Hannah, would you like to unmute yourself? There you are, Hannah. Welcome, Hannah. And for brevity, I'm going to let each of the artists introduce themselves. So go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you. You can see my screen okay? All right. So I am Hannah Johnson. I am an emerging ceramic artist, born and raised out of Hamilton, Ontario. I went to Sheridan College and graduated with my degree in ceramics last spring. And I am currently a ceramics MFA candidate at Kent State University in Kent, Ohio. So I'm in my studio right now in Ohio. So we're going to jump right in. Inspiration. So talking about form inspiration, my work deals a lot with themes of artificiality and femininity and frivolity and exploring notions and ideas of beauty. And I take a lot of inspiration for my forms from domestic objects. So teapots and area rugs, inspiration from desserts, candies. But then I also take inspiration from these like little mundane, funny things that happen. So this piece is the piece that's in the fireworks show currently. It's called Shrimp Sunday. And the inspiration was from this little meme that's on the right side here of a shrimp that's like all hunched over in a chair. And I saw it one day as I was taking a break in the studio, and I was sitting exactly like that shrimp was, and I'd been complaining about my back a lot lately. So there's just like these like silly little things in everyday life that come up. I've also, like I said, been looking at artificiality in the context of desserts and candies. So this sculpture on the left is a 3-tiered Jell-O salad, essentially, that's covered in jelly beans. And I think there's something really interesting about desserts in that they take a source object like a bean, and through this process of manufacturing, there's this like artificial kind of hollow representation of it. So playing with ideas like that. My surface and material inspiration, I like to combine ceramic materials and non-ceramic materials. So this piece makes use of underglaze and glaze and luster, but then it also uses non-ceramic materials like glitter and Mod Podge and Pearl-Ex, which is a sculpture pigment that you finish surfaces with. And a lot of my inspiration comes from just like shopping and like wandering around through the hardware store, through arts and crafts stores, and seeing what I can find and what feels exciting to me. So that's how I decided to use the glitter and the Mod Podge and all these like other non-ceramic materials that you don't usually see in ceramics. Okay. Moving on to inspiration in the making process. So as a grad student, there's the constant requirement to be making as often and as much as you possibly can. And it can get really easy to get tripped up and worried about inspiration. And because I'm constantly making, it inevitably happens where I am making through periods of like really great inspiration and then also making through periods that kind of feel like an inspiration desert. So in order to combat that a little bit, I try and firstly, I try to set up my space in a way that makes me feel inspired, but also gives me a little bit of direction. So the photo on the left is my desk in my studio. And I like to keep these like inspiration boards up. They're not really ceramic related, but they give me some direction aesthetically. And then I also like to keep like articles that I find, song lyrics or poem poem lines, little like material studies that people give me or that I find, like paint swatches, just like small things that kind of give me a direction. And it's nice as well because when people come in, it gives them a little bit of context as for the direction that I'm trying to head. I also like to try and keep as much of my materials like out and around and visible in the studio as I can. So this photo on the left is a collection of my glazes and a couple triaxle blends. And I just find being able to look at them while I'm making really helps. It keeps me going and keeps me inspired, but it also can guide the surfaces or the forms that I'm making just by being able to see them on the shelf and kind of keep them in mind while I'm actually building something. So in the actual building process, these are a few photos of the same piece. So I'm not really somebody who like meticulously plans things out. I like to have an element of play. I find that that can be really inspiring while working. And essentially what I'll try and do is I'll nail down like the base form and then create a couple different options for these like appendages and adornments that I put on my pieces. So this piece was one that was like very challenging for me because it just felt like whatever I put on top, I wasn't satisfied with it. But being able to make like a variety or an assortment of attachments, it takes the pressure off of feeling like you have to like nail it on the first try. It gives a little bit of wiggle room, which I find to be very helpful. So talking about my learning journey, I think it's really hard to address and talk about my growth and my journey as a student and as a ceramic artist without acknowledging all these wonderful people that that have really been there and helped to give me some guidance along the way and have inspired me immensely. I've been very lucky to have amazing faculty and really hardworking peers at both Sheridan and Kent State. So this is just a few photos of the people who inspire me as well. Now, on to my current body of work. So like I said earlier, I am exploring themes of artificiality, femininity, and frivolity, and exploring notions and celebrating notions of beauty. This body of work has been really exciting for me because it has given me the opportunity to explore mediums other than ceramics and clay. I've always been drawn to using other materials, but I struggled to find a way to integrate them fully. And I think that part of that was just that I wasn't giving myself the license to spend time on things outside of clay. So this year, I've really kind of given myself the rein, or the free rein, I guess, to try exploring that. So I've been getting really into textiles. I've been exploring with flocking, but I've also been tufting and making all of my own rugs for these pieces. And sometimes these things don't always feel like they translate or they're very helpful. But I've come to realize that like everything kind of folds into itself. So I'm giving myself the opportunity to do that. Last thing that I wanted to talk about for this body of work is the surfaces. The surfaces and the colors are obviously very important for this work. And before this body of work, I would do anything I could to avoid glazing something. But in order to get the colors and the surfaces I wanted, I had to embrace glazing. So I've done a lot of testing, and I finally feel like I've like got a palette of glazes nailed down that are reliable, and it just makes me really, really excited to keep going. So that is my brief talk on inspiration. I'll hand it off to Anne Randeraad next here.
Hello. My name is Anne Randeraad, and I am a wood fire clay artist. And I'm from Laurel, Ontario, a little hamlet northwest of Orangeville, just over an hour from Toronto. I don't remember a time that I wasn't drawn to art or the making process or clay. I was that kid, the kid that was making a pinch bowl out of mud, laying it out in the sun to dry, and dreaming of how beautiful it would be when it was done. I was imagining how cool it would be to use something that I made in such a primary way. It took me a long time to act upon this dream and to take my first pottery class. And I was a true beginner. I made lots of lumpy, lopsided and heavy bowls, but I was hooked. After just one set of classes, I went out and bought a wheel and began the ride of my life. This piece, Emanate, was made 5 or 6 years ago, and it took me a few years to let go of it, as it represented a successful pivot point for me. When I started with wood firing, the pieces were quite neutral, and it took some time for me to introduce color, and I was very happy with the results with this particular piece. Inspiration. For me, inspiration is everywhere in nature. I live in a rural area, and I have lots of opportunity to see beautiful, very intricate pieces of nature up close and personal. For me, it's the nuances in nature that I aim to represent in my work. I find beauty in details like the flourishing lichens on this old rusty panel, or the complex form of the foxtail lily, with each moisture droplet reflecting its own beauty. We have peacocks, and their color, their intricate feather patterns lead me to use turquoise tones and to chase the look of the checked feather markings into chino glazes and carbon trapping. In taking a closer look at everyday ordinary in my life, like the center of this standard poppy, it brings me so much appreciation for nature, and I only hope that I can recreate that feeling, that essence or energy, and that complex beauty. Sometimes, like the image on the left, it is even the glazed successes that lead to further inspiration. The process itself is very intense. This image of my kiln here is Isla. She was built about 6 years ago, and she's named after my grandmother, who was a really very courageous, creative woman, somebody who was very strong in character. She even wrote under a pseudonym for a local paper long before women were allowed to be given credit for any of their writing. She also bought an expensive new coat, brought it home, cut it up, and redesigned it to sew and created it, to make what she wanted out of it. So she was, in my opinion, she was very brave, and I certainly aspire to be like her. So Isla was the perfect name for my kiln. This kiln is a 65 cubic foot kiln, and if you see the image on the left, you will see that the fire bars have endured the process, the hard, intense process of the firing itself. Those fire bars are an inch thick, and they have to be they have to be replaced every 10 to 12 firings. The loading of Isla she's a 65 cubic foot kiln, sorry, the wear chamber, and she takes 4 to 6 people a day to load. And then once it's kind of like making a 3D puzzle. And we are directing the flames in how they move around the pieces in order to get the results that we're looking for. The firing of the kiln takes between 15 and 30 hours, and we're stoking every 4 to 5 minutes. When we are not stoking, we are selecting the next wood or raking coals, and we fire up to cone 10 or 2300 degrees. As seen here, the flame length can reach to more than 30 feet. The flames begin in the firebox. They travel into the wear chamber, where they do a complete 360 and then move up the chimney and out the top of the chimney. Here you can see we're in really good reduction. It's the dual atmosphere of the wood kiln that gives us the results that we're looking for. And these pieces are aiming to mimic nature's rich earthy tones with loose abstract markings with the secondary glazes. And we're always paying close attention as we're loading into the kiln, so that we can keep some nice tight spaces around the pots, as well as keeping some areas that are a little bit looser, in order to create more variance in the response of the glazes. One second here. Not sure what's happened to my mouse. There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, so sometimes when my secondary glazes are applied, like the piece on the right here, they are controlled in a more controlled manner, and they are more organic patterned markings that are layered to create depth. Sorry, to create the depth that I find everywhere in nature. This kind of application is done using resists of paper, cloth, wax, vinyl, or other found objects. For me, nature's inspiration is endless, whether it's in the big skies, rich colors, patterns, or intricate details. I only hope that I can continue to live in my happy place and create and wood fire to mimic and express my gratitude for beauty in the nature around me and in my works. Now I would like to introduce Nadia Tasci.
Hello, everyone. Can you see me okay? Great. Okay. Hi, my name is Nadia Tasci, and I'm just going to share my screen with you. Okay. My name is Nadia Tasci, and I'm an established Canadian glass artist, and I have a full-time studio practice with glass flameworking and silver jewelry fabrication as my main focus. Over the course of my career, I've used the medium of glass to express various artistic narratives. My design approach begins with a tremendous devotion to my material. I always aim to push traditional glass bead making boundaries. I use unique methods of design to explore the visual dialogue between color, form, and pattern in an attempt to create dynamic and engaging contemporary jewelry. In my early years, I was mostly inspired by my technical developments. So I would work with what I developed in my practice to create my art and design. As my development and level of expertise broadened, I expanded on what I wanted to design. As you can see from my first slide presentation, I spent a few years working on encasing miniature paperweight flowers. And they're basically, I developed a highly detailed flower made from borosilicate glass. To develop this technique in craftsmanship, I attended a 5-day workshop in Maine in a hot shop. And I spent a year afterwards developing the technique until I was satisfied with the execution. And we'll move on to the next few slides. Okay, the next 3 slides that I'm going to show you are a different direction for sure in terms of design. Again, it's building on my technical knowledge with glass flameworking, and also what tied in is my influence from my travels. I've traveled extensively and done a lot of backpacking throughout the world. And what inspired this particular necklace piece was my travels to India and some Southern European countries around that same time, like Italy and the south of France. The highly decorative historical architecture and textiles of these countries greatly influenced me at the time. So you can see here the Indian textiles, like spending time in Rajasthan, India. I tried to do some block printing and weaving and lots of interesting textiles at the time. And we did a lot of touring around Rajasthan and saw some beautiful practices of the people, those tribal people. So it was a very inspirational experience. And also being in Italy and being in Asia and those countries, there's just so much rich history everywhere you look. So it really influenced me when I got back to the studio. And I also worked on some gold leaf on the glass, definitely inspired by my travels as well. You can, in a lot of places in Europe, you can pick up on the Byzantine traditions. And then yeah, and you can see here the tiles in Italy and how they influenced the pieces in this particular piece. And then moving into the last few years, I've really taken a shift into color, vibrant design, and that's kind of where my current practice is for the most part. I'm enjoying color, form, contemporary design. I think I'm in a really comfortable space creatively. I feel like I've worked so hard on developing my technique that I feel very free now with my material. And I feel I have such a great close relationship with it, like a very intuitive relationship. It's very second nature for me. Oh, something just opened here, sorry. So yeah, moving on to some more contemporary designs. This is the chromatic bracelets. That's an exploration of color and form. Some of the questions are, what do I do when I feel uninspired? I have the experience of knowledge and understanding that this kind of phase is very temporary. Just from working with glass for over 15 years. And yeah, and I basically think it's just important to show up and just keep working in the studio. And taking a break sometimes is really important, like a vacation or a day off, or slowing down my practice momentarily. Sometimes I'm actually uninspired because of burnout. So I take restorative time and it gets me back and really in a very, very inspired mode. This was a particular design from a period of before that I was very burned out, and then I just got back in after having some quiet time, and I felt clear and ready to work on some new designs. So yeah, so basically I don't lose faith. I just know that it's a temporary phase and that there's a lot of reasons why you can feel uninspired sometimes. Sometimes it's just taking a step back a little bit. So what process works for me as an artist is very often I get visual images in my thoughts, and I work through them with hot glass by sitting at the bench and forming the hot glass, and moving it around, and then trying to work through ideas that I have in my head. Sometimes it can take me a few months to work through this process before I see results, but I have so much experience now in my studio practice that I just know that I have to be patient and let things happen. And what have I learned about myself as a maker? I would say is that I'm pretty determined and hardworking. I don't mind putting the time in. I really enjoy that. And I've learned that if I have a design idea that I need to work through, as difficult as it seems, if I keep at it, I'll either get to see what I set out to do, or I'll have discovered something really exciting and new through that process. So that's basically my my brief introduction to my practice. I hope you enjoyed looking at my work and coming along the journey with me. I'm going to introduce you now. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to introduce you now to Nikola Wojewoda. So Nikola, whenever you're ready, please feel free to join us. Hi, Nikola.
Hi, well pronounced.
Thank you. I worked on it.
Indeed. I'll share my screen now too. Uh-oh. Oh, something just happened. Hold on a second. Oh, there we go. Can you all hear me and see my screen? Uh-oh. Oh dear. Hang on a second. Here we go. Can you hear me? I'm not sure what's happening. Oh dear. Hold on.
We can hear you.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. I'm going to back up. Oops. No, one sec. I'm having a bit of trouble for some reason with the hold on a moment. Uh-oh. Okay, forgive me for this awkwardness. Let me just go back to, there we go. Go to the first. There we go. All right. So sorry for that slow start. Thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Nikola Wojewoda, and I'm coming to you from Hamilton. And I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for your amazing work and for your very inspiring talks. So I'm delighted to be new to clay and very grateful to Fusion for their support of regional clay and glass artists. I'm really excited to be in Fireworks 2023 and to share this opportunity to think about inspiration and how I've experienced its many forms over the years. So my talk is a little autobiographical. So I think that inspiration is actually a natural state, rooted in the deep human need to be creative. And that need is sometimes active and sometimes dormant. So my own art journey has been circuitous. After graduating from OCAD, I exhibited in a variety of mediums and materials for many years. I was drawn to making mythic imagery, exploring the human condition through archetype using figure and animal in landscape. I tried to respond to impulses from my subconscious, and although I didn't always fully understand my paintings, I knew that they were a profound mining of my psyche and how I processed the life experiences that were shaping me. In my 30s, I stopped making art, and I shifted my focus to raising a family. For many years, part of me was dormant, but one day the overwhelming need returned. I thought long and hard about the nature and purpose of creativity and my relationship to art making, especially at that stage in life. I was motivated to begin again, but I had to find a way back in, especially at that stage. I knew that the key would be to use completely new techniques to basically begin all over again. So inspiration came through material in the form of paper and clay. I began constructing simple graphic collages using the cardstock of paint companies. Soon after, I took a sculpting class where I had my very first experience with the responsiveness of clay. I was astounded at how the lightest touch shifted the figure from alive to dead and back again. And like so many, I fell in love with this material and began having a very serious look at contemporary ceramics. I was incredibly inspired by the variety, the relevance, and the phenomenal quality of functional and sculptural ceramic art. I took a pottery class, joined several local guilds, and slowly began to learn through demos and workshops. Looking at all kinds of art and listening to what artists have to say is a constant source of inspiration, stimulation, and validation for me. My earliest experiments were these slab-built vases, and I've been hand building ever since. Early on, I had a special experience while waiting for the studio kiln to cool. A soot-covered woman who was raku firing rushed by my table, looked at the bisque I was about to glaze and said, "You better sand that, put in 110% now, you won't regret it." A few moments later, to my horror, she carried in a big, beautiful, broken bowl and said, "It happens in ceramics. Attach yourself to nothing you make." When I'd unloaded the kiln and sat staring, disappointed that nothing looked how I expected it to, she rushed by again and said, "It looks great. Learn to accept what the kiln gives you," and flew back out the door. It was in that moment that I realized that clay is a Zen mindset. I've been inspired by the incredible generosity and warmth that is unique to the clay community. The need to share resources, the tradition of skill sharing from master to student, the humble appreciation of the domestic, and an admirable work ethic are the inspiring qualities of artists in this field. I was fortunate to be invited to experience the fun intensity of a wood firing. A few years ago, when offered a solo show, I experienced the dreaded artist block. It wasn't a lack of ideas. I was overwhelmed with too many and no capacity to focus. It felt horrible. It finally occurred to me that if I was in this paralyzing tornado, I should go to the quiet eye of the storm. And like Dorothy, I watched as ideas and impulses flew around in my mind. I started to recognize the persistent ones that I needed to pay attention to. I saw that I needed to draw, despite my intimidation from not having done it in many years. The Contemplate series of ceramic plates came out of giving myself permission for a no pressure, no theme, free-for-all. And that winter, I happily listened to the Tales of a Red Clay Rambler. Podcasts, the interviews with these clay artists was an amazing exposure to the field. My mantra was, don't be afraid, make a mistake, no regrets. I now appreciate that artist block is actually a gift because it can be a reset, a rare opportunity to tune in, to shift direction, and to be re-inspired. I've come to recognize that my process needs fallow periods, where like a magpie, I collect, intuitively following random topics and thoughts, words and images, responding to and questioning world events, until a web of personally meaningful connections forms. And eventually a central theme emerges that anchors, the anchor that inspires research. This series of vintage wallpaper collages and the accompanying clay sculptures arose from several streams of investigation. I was thinking about the source of imagination, those deep wells of myth and metaphor, about how cultural beliefs translate into social systems and hierarchies, and how they affect the individual. When I happened to stumble upon the topic of Siberian shamanism, this fascinating practice spurred research, and that led to personal introspection and to questions about the way we seek to understand ourselves and the obstacles to that seeking. I like to conceptually combine 2 and 3 dimensions. The ceramic herbarium of psychedelic plants explores their ancient use and the primal experiences of the divine. The Army of Virtues collages are a series of fictional deities ones we may meet when we meet ourselves in that deeper state. This work arose from my growing anxieties about the chaotic state of this post-truth era. Embedded in these icons of virtue are the very contradictions of humanity's compassions and cruelties. We can't hope to face the challenges of our time without also facing our less than virtuous selves. I can now see that during those many dormant years, an inner alchemy was taking place. Yet the deep root of who I am and what I'm drawn to remained constant. I've accepted that at my core, I'm a symbolist, interested in creativity as a vehicle for social inquiry, for self-discovery, transformation, and healing. I see each body of work like chapters in a book, an ongoing story. This is a large installation called To Learn to Love. The 3 6-foot-tall panels and 2 sculptures are surrounded by ceramic flowers. It was made over the last 3 years in response to the traumatic upheavals, the intense personal, social, and political events we are all collectively experiencing. It's a response to the shifts in my own awareness. And as all the elements came together over time, to my surprise, I see that there's much hope in it. I've come to understand that I need to express my relationship to this complicated world, my concerns, my vulnerabilities, and my growth through these personal iconographies and stories. I'm inspired to continue to learn, to remain hopeful, and to continue to make. Thank you, everybody.
I'll let you take over, Francois.
Okay, oops, share screen. Is that the one? I've given you a lot of fun, haven't I? Okay, how does it show on your end? Closed captioning. Am I ready to go?
Yes, you're ready to go.
Thank you. Okay. With regards to my sources of inspiration, I will answer with the who and what inspires. Let's start with the who. They are Walter Dexter, Nina Hole, Hans Copper, Stephen the Stabler, Peter Volkos, John Mason, Jeremy Jernigan, and well, I know I will discover more along the way, that's for sure. I love the visual aspect of clay very much, and very much like dry surfaces. Those artists have that in common, and I picked up on that quite early on when I started working with clay, and I wanted to explore and research this at length. My slides are not changing. Our screen sharing. I can't. My screen's my slides are not moving. Here we go with this instead. Okay. Do you see my full screen? So, okay, so I got to be very captivated and fascinated by ceramic materials themselves. I have a good collection of materials, which I'm really proud of. This slide shows a very small part of it. when the test shows promise, I have all the materials that I need to make modifications that are required. So handy, and I just keep going until I find something that is enticing. And so as an emerging artist, I do an uncommon volume of surface treatment, research and development. I love it. It's so interesting. When I get good results, it gets my brain fired up with all their possible applications. I really like to stay within the margins of low-fired sintered crust. That's materials that are in the process of vitrification, but are stopped developing before they are mature. I play within that range, and results vary widely. And then I work on deciphering why it does whatever it is it does. I find the prospect very stimulating because get a tremendous amount of data pieces that help me understand the relationship between the materials and their behavior on different clays and in different heat conditions. For example, here, this is Kebose number 2. I have applied fired a wash that was composed of lithium carbonate and iron oxide. I then applied a coat of another formula, thinking that the lithium that is now fused to the clay body would contribute to the development of the second coat of materials, but it didn't. It actually slightly vitrified the surface of the vessel, and the second coat, it didn't stick very well. That made a mess on the shelf, but I ended up with an amazing surface, though. Not repeatable, though. Okay, so the second point is about when I'm inspired or uninspired and how I work through my art process. Lately, particularly when I feel uninspired, I go back to my sketchbook of geometric composition studies. You might not see very well there because it's the pencil on paper. I started doing these when reading the course on the structure of visual relationships of late Rowena Reed Costello, she co-founded the Industrial Design Education course at Pratt Institute. She's absolutely brilliant.
Francois, sorry, can I interrupt you for a minute?
Yes.
I'm just getting your initiation page. I'm not getting any of your images. Are you seeing your images coming through on your page?
I am sharing screen and I do see them, yes.
And can I just ask the Gardiner Museum Tech if they're coming through on theirs? Are the other participants seeing Francois's images?
I'm not seeing the images.
Thank you, Nikola. So Francois, could you just take a moment and see if you can forward your images, perhaps in your slides, slideshow?
Forward. I am screen sharing.
All right. Perhaps the Gardiner Museum has some
Yes.
suggestions.
Did you put it in full presentation mode?
Francois, it might be best to just share your what your screen with your notes.
I am sharing my screen right now.
You are sharing your screen, but we only see your intro slide.
Slideshow. Beginning. What about now?
No, unfortunately not. There we go.
Sharing. Okay. So
Yeah.
you missed all of that. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Still the same. What happened? So, okay, the geometric compositions. Okay, so I also use those compositions to study color combinations. That's where I was. And for this, I use Illustrator. I draw each form of the composition separately and then put colors on each of them, pushing and pulling on the effects they have over one another. This can completely change the value of a given form or composition, as you can see. I find a lot of satisfaction when they fall into pleasing and engaging arrangements. Those are very interesting exercises for me. I learned a lot about compositions working. My apologies. I'm giving you a lot of trouble today. I then use those compositions on my cabossé vessels. That's a series of vessels which I will show you shortly. By the way, if you're wondering, a cabossé is a French word that means beaten, battered, rugged, dented, and it describes the surface of my vessel. Okay, so we are at. Lately, it's been quite fun actually because of my solo show opening in mid-June. I'm taking those bidimensional geometric compositions and visualize how to make them in 3 dimensions. 5 of the 15 pieces of my show will be abstract sculptures with those block colors. With regard to form making, when uninspired, I go to books about artists. The most influential to this day has been Walter Dexter, as nobody can tell here. He's the one who got me to sever the cord between pottery and sculpture. He gave me the push that I needed to get completely immersed in sculptural work and to dare go large. That was inspiring me quite a bit. Oh, this brought me to Stephen the Stabler. I've been looking more into lately. His abstracted figurative works are so loose and gestural. I want to work like that and let my brain, my instinct guide my hand and my brain. Okay, so the third and last point to talk about is as a maker and how my body of work represents me as an artist. I will be showing one such installation at the Canadian Clay and Glass Gallery this summer. Within the Emergence group exhibition of the year's 3 finalists of the Winnie French Chance Awards, or mix. This installation is composed of hollowed horns with blackened insides, and they depict the opposite of the cornucopia. So I called it cornu deficiencia, what it might fall, but it works. So I've always been very concerned with the human behaviors that are objectionable all my life since I'm a teenager. We have a hard time comporting ourselves civilly throughout the towards one another throughout the ages. We're like that. Furthermore, we produce enough wealth for the whole of mankind, but we still decide not to share it evenly. We still choose to harm others day after day, actually millennia after millennia. My creative mind I can't help going back into these years of thought all the time. It is useless for me to fight it. It kind of defines my identity in this sense. It informs much of what I will do in the near and not so near future. Thank you very much, and my apologies for this blip of either my brain or the computer.
Thank you, Francois, for the presentation. And I'm now going to welcome all the speakers online. So everybody can unmute themselves, put their video on. I've got a few questions over here.
That's great.
All right, so everybody is on. So I have a question for Hannah. This is from Landon Carletti. Where is your favorite place to find new mediums to work with?
Hi, Landon. My favorite place is probably the hardware store. I worked at Arona for 6 years, and I met my husband while working there. So I find if I can, like, whenever I can go to the hardware store and just like look around and walk around, it brings back nice memories, but it's also, there's just like so many good things there that you wouldn't necessarily expect to use. Yeah.
And then it has an add-on is what has been the most surprising, exciting, or satisfying new medium to work with? This is for Hannah again, an add-on to that.
The most exciting thing that I've used recently is kind of, oh, it's so bad. It's polymer clay. Plastic, essentially. Like it's kind of a little taboo, but it's been really fun and exciting, and there's something really satisfying about using the things that you're maybe not supposed to be allowed to use.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, and then there's another question, again from Landon. This is to Nikola. You speak so elegantly and pointedly about your work. Did it take you a long time to learn how to speak like that, or have you always had a knack for verbal communication?
You know what? I saw that and I typed to him that was a really kind thing to say. So it's a knack. I think it's just, yeah, I think it's a knack. But you know, honestly, I just want to just say how absolutely like it's great that this topic was inspiration, because everybody's work is so uniquely them, uniquely deep. Like everybody's diving so deep into their material, into their inclinations. And what makes art so incredibly inspiring is that. I love the fact, like I have now in my head this idea of Hannah's refined taboos. Like the fact that she's mixing mediums is like right up my alley. And one of the reasons is when I came back to an art practice after 25 years and I was introduced to clay, I was shocked to discover that clay had been pushed into this silo of non-art, and that craft was not given the dignity that it deserves. It was shocking to me to come from, you know, sculpture where I was casting in bronze and suddenly to find out that, you know, that clay is a lowbrow material, and how outdated those ideas are. And the fact that that people are that the silos are beginning to dissolve is really great. I think that is fantastic. And one of those things is how people are now using material in unconventional ways, mixing materials, mixing glass and clay, mixing textile and yeah, exactly. So anyway, done.
Nikola, I think we need to get you to write some articles for us. So yeah, you're very literary. You've explained a lot of things. You have a kind of a an in-depth understanding, and you're able to articulate it, which a lot of artists, they're working in clay for a reason, because they're not so verbal, right? So that's very interesting. I really do appreciate what everyone has done. There's so much exciting work here, and to have a sense to delve deeper into what inspires you. I also like the idea that, you know, you have enough confidence, I think, to actually get through the fallow periods, or we called it, what was it? The desert of non-inspiration, which is a very real issue, right? Happens to all of us. And Anne, I'm also thinking of your wood fire when you're out there in the middle of the night, stoking the kiln, and then, you know, how many times you have to rise to the occasion of the fire. Yeah, there's a real labor of love and a necessity, I think, as well, for us to have to do these pieces. Do any of you have comments about each other's work, or anything that you'd like to add to our discussion today?
You're fantastic artists. You're amazing. And I can't wait to see them all. Yeah. It's one thing to see them online. Yeah, and then live, and that's going to come soon.
Yes.
That's right. There's a question from Danielle Skensos. She said, "Thank you for sharing your work." Maybe we'll go with Nadia. Which artists or artist influence you?
What artists influence me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my. I don't know. That's a really good question. I don't really find that that artists necessarily inspire me. I think that for me, it's a different type of experience. I don't really look at other art for inspiration. It's more I do right now currently look more at design than I ever have, like contemporary design, like interior design, architecture. I'm just really smitten with it, and I never was in the past. But yeah, for me, it's more that influence, more so than other artists. I mean, I think it's incredible if we really think about it, like how we are inspired. I think that so much of it is even subconscious. You know, it's just like our daily observations and the way we take in the world. I think it's a pretty interesting experience when you're a visual person, and you know, yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily inspired by artists. It's more just my experience observing, yeah, probably the interior, exterior, you know, architecture stuff in that realm, interior industrial design, stuff like that now. Yeah.
Nadia, that chromatic bracelet was stunning, and it was very
Thank you.
architectural. It just really spoke to me.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a really strong piece. I mean, they're all strong, but that one really,
Thank you.
really drew me in.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
I think last question, just to kind of tie it all off. When you're talking about when each of your presentations in terms of inspiration, someone did like mood boards, the space that you're in, things like that. When you get that inspiration, and when you guys talked about having that kind of lull and returning to that, do you pick up where you left off, or do you sometimes go on a different route and create something different? Maybe Francois, I'll go to you.
If it would, can you rephrase, please?
Yeah, sure. So like basically you have this inspiration, you have this idea, but maybe you want to take that break. But then when you return to it, right? Let's say you have another inspiration kind of spring to it. Do you go back to the same thing, or do you go on to something that's different?
Distance changes perspective tremendously. And I have pieces that I've been sleeping for a little while. You missed that slide, Cabossé number 2. When I started it was a few years back, and it's been sitting there. There's another artist that came and put some actually fabric. She's a textile artist. It was beautiful. But I needed to do something with the vessel itself because I thought it needed a lift, and it got the lift with the fabric. But it was not tied onto it. It was we used earth magnets, so it was very firm, but just floating on top of it. The vessel needed to be finished, and I figured I tried all sorts of things, and nothing was coming, and so it slept for quite a bit. And eventually, I was developing, working on a certain material, and as I said in the presentation, that's what I laid on top of it. It's like it needs something, but the distance allowed me to do that. It came out as something absolutely completely different and not repeatable. But distance does change my perspective, particularly with geometric compositions, actually. And I love those exercises. They're so good for my brain. Well, my brain, I don't know, it's more like here, moving pieces around. That notebook that I was showing in this slideshow that you probably didn't see have repeating patterns, actually. So I start with an oval and I add a piece to it. Doesn't work all that much. Change page, move the object, different place, different size, and start composing all around at distance, actually from whatever it is you're working in composition and whatever surface treatment or form, or you come back and you do have a different perspective, and everybody has experienced that, right?
That's great.
Right?
Yes.
I like the idea that failures can move you forward. You know,
Oh,
you
definitely.
go, I've got to get out of this somehow, and then you make a leap,
Yep.
which changes
You do.
everything.
Yeah, it does. It does. And besides, you're always working on some of the stuff while you're in that period of not working on that piece and all of these things. It's reading stuff, seeing other people, other people's work. Like today, my brain is filled with all sorts of new forms, new lines, new color combinations, new uses. And when I go back to that piece, all of that stuff is in my brain. So of course it's going to inform the rest. I get inspired very, very much by people. Nobody can tell, right?
Good.
And then one last comment from Linda Williams, says, thank you all very much. Nikola, I love your comment about the creative block being a gift. Last question to Anne, when you talked about like nature and in terms of like the firing responses to the glazes, and you don't know what's going to be coming out of it. Is there a vision that you start with and then you, when it comes out, are you satisfied with it, or sometimes do you play around with it more?
Often there's a target range, so not a very tight target, but I have an idea of what I'm going to get. But because I don't actually know whether I'm going to have predominantly oxidation or reduction, that can change quite completely the outlook. So I could have, even if I put imagery on the piece, if it happens to be an area of the kiln that gets heavily reduced, that can actually obliterate the imagery I put on. By the same token, if there's a lot of ash in that area, the same thing can happen. So of course you take time and care in placing the pieces, but there is absolutely no guarantee in the outcome. But if the pieces turn out fantastic, or even sometimes if they don't meet what I'm looking for, they are the springboard for the next pieces, always. Every single firing, I learn something new, and I take new ideas from the most current firing. They always go forward.
That's that theme of showing up, you know, keep working. The inspiration comes out of the last piece.
Yes, definitely.
Good.
All right.
So if there's no more questions, then I'd like to thank our participants. I encourage people to go and see the exhibition at the Gardiner Museum and fireworks, and also to join Fusion membership and scholarships. And we're going to have our opening party at the Gardiner Museum on the 30th of May. Hope to see you all there.
And thank you to
We'll be
the
there.
Gardiner. What a gift the Gardiner Museum is to Canada.
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
Indeed.
Oh my God.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Thank you, Adeline and Gardiner Museum.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Everybody.